The category is What the Trans, darling?
Hello and welcome to What the Trans.
What the trans? It's too hot. I can't put my energy into it. It's just too fucking hot.
It is. It's very warm. At time of recording, it is heatwave time here in the UK. So this is the episode where we are both mostly naked, but also kind of sad, for reasons which will become clear over the course of the episode. How have you been, Michelle?
I have been very, very good because I went to Trans Pride Brighton. That is what the second half of this is all going to be about. It was a very, very good day. It did have its issues that we will get into. Mistakes were made, but overall the event was still a success. I had a lovely time. I actually got a little bit of sunburn this time. I've been so good at all the events, all the prides I've been going to this summer, and this is the one time I slipped up, the one time I missed a little bit on my neck, and oof.
It got you. Damn that sun.
Wear sunblock, kids. How are you doing?
I'm all right. So the big work thing, the Manchester International Festival is now over. So there was a staff party, which was of mythic proportions, frankly, as far as staff dues go. Won't bore you with the details, but yes, Monday took a certain amount of recovery, but everyone else was in the same boat, literally just a load of really hungover people in sunglasses in the office just going, it's too hot.
I did like those days when I was working in an office and the day after like a staff party. I did enjoy those days because it was very much accepted around the office that not a lot's going to get done today. We are basically all here just to tick a box. So let's just tick that box and be there for each other.
Yeah, precisely. And during a heat wave as well, that's kind of what you need. It's like, you kind of do actually need somebody to be going around the office reminding everybody to drink water. Yeah, no, I'm all right. Reeling from the news of the week in terms of politics, which is a very nice segue into talking about those things. So yeah, shall we do that? Should we do the thing?
Yeah, let's do some terrible news, and it is. It lives up to its fucking name.
I mean, there are always going to be weeks where this is the case, unfortunately, and this is definitely one of them. Yes, but we've done the legwork, so you don't have to. So you just sit back, relax, and try and relax as I tell you all about these really awful things. And so, of course, to begin with, terrible news is us joining every single other news outlet this week in reporting that Boris Johnson is now the Prime Minister of Great Britain. This indeed lives up to this segment's name. Johnson has got a very long history of being quite outspoken in a racist and sexist and homophobic sort of a way. The news media is currently packed to the gills with lists of all of the terrible things that he has ever said and done. We're not going to offer an exhaustive list here, but some of his, shall we say, finest moments. On homosexuality, in his book Friends, Voters, Countrymen, Johnson said that if gay marriage was okay, and I was uncertain on the issue, then I saw no reason in principle why a union should not be consecrated between 3 men, as well as 2 men, or indeed 3 men and a dog. That's going to be my Boris Johnson voice. I recognise it's not completely accurate in sounding like him, but it definitely is accurate in summing up what he is.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have my full support on this particular point.
No problem. Thank you. Yes. Also in the year 2000, he attacked the idea of LGBT inclusive lessons in schools, which is something else that's been in the news quite recently, calling it Labour's appalling agenda, encouraging the teaching of homosexuality in schools and all the rest of it. Now, when it comes to people of colour, Johnson wrote the following in The Telegraph back in 2002. What a relief it must be for Blair to get out of England. It is sad that the Queen has come to love the Commonwealth, partly because it supplies her with regular cheering crowds of flag-waving pickaninnies. Which is just so gross. That's just straight up fucking racist.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut in on you here, but I just got to say, that is like 18th century racism. That wasn't cool to say in like 1920, and in 1920 that wasn't particularly not racist time either. I'm just saying that is
it's a very classic and insidious manner of racism because people write it off as buffoonery, right? Oh, Boris Johnson, he's not to be taken seriously, and here he is. And I'm spotting a parallel with something else that happened recently. Anyway, so he went on to say in the same Telegraph column in 2002 that African people have watermelon smiles. Again, That's just... He also recently compared Muslim women who wear niqabs and burqas to letterboxes and bank robbers, and also referred to Islam as the problem in the aftermath of the 7/7 London bombings. So if anybody is particularly hoping for Johnson to tackle Islamophobia in the Conservative Party and generally in the UK, then you are probably going to be left wanting. Now, it's important to point out that Johnson does have a fairly liberal voting record on LGBT issues, but his previous use of shitty language to curry up hateful support shouldn't be ignored, and the trans community should be especially wary as, in our research, we have yet to find Johnson saying anything supportive or shitty about trans people. So simply put, to our knowledge, Johnson has never talked about GRA reform publicly, so who knows if this is even on his radar. And another wrinkle, quite a big one in fact, because Brexit is still a thing that's still ripping the country apart, we might have to wait a good long while before we find out. So till then, there are still things you can do. In the description, we will provide links to help you find your MP so that you can write to them. They still work for you, and every little bit helps, so write to your MP, go meet them at their surgeries, talk to them about why GRA reform matters, or why additional funding for gender identity services on the NHS matters, and perhaps maybe a little bit about why the media's non-stop assault on trans people might require some sort of intervention at some stage. Yes, there's just so much to take in here, isn't there?
Yeah, this is very much one of those weeks where there was just too much to fit into our podcast, and our podcast has such a narrow focus anyway. It can feel, it definitely felt like when putting this together, and I know that you'll agree with me on this, that it felt like we were leaving stuff out. Like there are so many angles to all of this that could affect trans people and can affect trans people of colour and can affect trans people of various faiths and trans people of all varying levels of socioeconomic, whatever it is. But we just don't have the time to go into every single angle. And you can feel quite depressed looking at the state of things and feel completely powerless. And I think the thing I want to get out there as much as possible is there are still things you can do. Seek out local groups that seek to protect the most vulnerable people in your local community. Write to your MP, even if your MP is the most backbench of backbench conservative who has openly said that trans people are full of shit for or whatever reason. Write to them anyway. There are still things we can do.
Obviously, the appointment of Johnson as Prime Minister is not without criticism from various corners, including the LGBT Conservatives. So they've asked for an apology about his previous comments about homophobia. That has yet to occur.
Yeah, and today on his first PMQs, he was, I can't remember the name specifically of the MP. They are an MP for the...
Sorry, just to clarify, PMQs, Prime Minister's Questions, every Wednesday morning in the House of Commons. Sorry for people outside...
to our American listeners, that's basically where the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition basically just have a fight for a couple of hours.
Verbally, although I'm sure it could escalate.
I'm sure it has escalated in previous centuries, but... Yeah, it's almost like a sports event in the way that it's portrayed here sometimes, like who's won, who had the best singer.
Yeah, it's definitely it's become a spectator event, hasn't it, somehow, which is really strange. Anyways, please,
yes,
I apologise for butting in.
It's okay, but a MP from the Liverpool area, not Angela Eagle. I didn't recognise who she was. I didn't actually catch her name, but she basically asked Boris Johnson to apologise for comments he made about Liverpool being a bunch of professional victims and a lot of other stuff based on the Hillsborough inquiry. And he did not apologise for that. And to me, I am not a professional political operative, but I would say that would be a slam dunk moment for him to say, I was a fool, that was silly, I apologise profusely to the people of Liverpool and earn some points, and he chose not to do that. So I don't think we're going to get an apology for any of his past statements on anything, whether it comes to the racist stuff he said or the homophobic stuff or any of that. We're not going to get an apology for that anytime soon. So we could read into that is potentially a sign of where his government is going to be at when it comes to these kinds of issues, but who knows?
Well, quite, although I think we can do a bit of reading of the tea leaves here, because obviously he's now appointed his cabinet, and so that's been described by some people as the most anti-human rights cabinet in decades. And actually, it's there was a story in Attitude that I saw just moments ago, which suggests, fully a third of the cabinet actually voted against equal marriage in the House of Commons when it was up for debates, because obviously it was the majority of the Conservatives actually voted against the Prime Minister, David Cameron, and said, no, we don't want equal marriage. So a whole bunch of people who voted no on that are now in the cabinet. So that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the most dangerous people in the cabinet at this point are Priti Patel, the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
She became quite infamous a few years back for championing the return of the death penalty. She is massively against LGBT rights based on her voting record. And it's not hyperbole to say that having this woman who is very much on the hard right of the party, and I mean hard right of the party, in charge of immigration and foreign affairs and all the stuff that comes under the Home Office, that is going to be absolutely fucking terrifying for a whole bunch of people in itself. And then you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has made his way into the cabinet as a leader of the House. And you've got Dominic Raab, who is the Foreign Secretary and the First Secretary of State, which isn't usually a title that is, like, you know, part of the cabinet, but it's something that... It is a title that Johnson has basically given him to basically big him up a bit, I guess.
Anoint him further, yeah. But Dominic Raab as Foreign Secretary, though, is, like, terrifying and hilarious, because this is the same MP that during the Brexit negotiations actually revealed that he wasn't initially aware that we were separated from France by the English Channel. And then he also got fired. Was he fired or did he resign after voting against his own Brexit plan?
He resigned. He resigned in protest to his own Brexit plan.
Yes, which, like... This is ridiculous. But as you say, Priti Patel and Rees-Mogg are kind of the two that are just like, oh my God, he's just going full Emperor Palpatine here, isn't he? He's just appointing literally the worst people. Because, of course, Priti Patel, as well as her incredibly awful voting record when it comes to LGBT rights, she was actually fired from a previous ministerial position she held because she was having secret meetings with Israel. And that's very much not the sort of conduct that you want to invite in any of your ministers, definitely not the fucking Home Secretary. It's like, okay, so we can see she is against LGBT people, and she is clearly, this is not going to be of net benefit to the majority of the people in the country. This is going to be a parliament, government, cabinet that is going to favour the people who are already rich and well off, and everybody else can just suffer.
Yeah, and swinging back round to the trans issues side of things, it's very hard to say specifically where a lot of the people on the cabinet lie with this kind of thing, but it should be said that Dominic Raab has publicly said that he does not think that it should be relatively easy for trans kids to be able to self-identify. And it should also be noted that according to a report in Politics Home last year, they reported on a poll that said that overwhelmingly Tory MPs opposed transgender reforms. And for the longest time, the front bench under Cameron and under May has had the pretense of being supportive of trans equality and trans rights. But that hasn't necessarily reflected what the backbenchers think. But now it feels like the backbenchers have claimed the front bench. But I would say now is a good time to take an interest in what this cabinet and what this government are doing, and to be prepared and to reach out and form links in your community to prepare for the worst but hope for the best.
Yeah, basically this is us telling you to get organised, alright? So, you know...
And we will of course provide links in the description to help you do that as best as we can. At least speaking for London, it would appear that the majority of people in London who have actually lived under his rule once before and know what that is, have not been happy about how he has been elected. And I say elected, I mean imposed on us by less than 100,000 Conservative Party members, most of whom do not look at all like the rest of the country.
Yes, I saw some statistics about them earlier on. They're like 87% white and 80-odd% over 50-odd, and in a given... tax bracket as in earnings, essentially, and it's just like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like we were against these people having a say. I would just like to say that there are more kinds of people, and it would have been nice if more kinds of people had input on who's going to run the fucking place. I'm just saying. I don't think that's entirely unreasonable in what is supposed to be a democratic country.
Indeed, because this is the second time in a row that this has happened now, where we've had a Prime Minister imposed upon us by the ruling party, when the decent thing to do would, of course, be to call a fucking election. So,
and I think this is the fourth time in my lifetime. Like, I think John Major got in this way, Gordon Brown got this way.
Yeah, and Boris Johnson had some choice words to say about that when it happened, didn't he? Back in 2007... when Tony Blair stepped down and said, it's Gordon Brown now, and everybody was like, what? No, you're supposed to do an election, you fuck. And Boris Johnson was outspokenly critical of this because, of course, it came from the opposing and at that time ruling party. Whereas now he's all for it, of course. So
yeah, this is definitely a thing that really needs to get patched up because, like, regardless of which party it is, it's not entirely right that a small portion of the country get to pick for everyone.
Additionally, little known historical fact here, but in 1672, a group of disaffected Dutch people killed and ate their prime minister. So I'm just saying, you know, direct action doesn't just have to be about placards.
I think for legal reasons we should point out that Ashley is indeed joking. Do not attempt to eat the Prime Minister.
Yeah, don't do political cannibalism. I think that's opening up a whole load of discourse that we just don't want.
And I think Boris Johnson would taste pretty fucking gross, to be honest with you.
All stringy and yeah.
Like, you would think that he would taste pretty good after a lifetime of, you know, roast beef and pork or whatever it is, but nah, I don't think so. I don't buy it.
Yeah. I mean, what? So, like, there's that phrase, isn't there, eat the rich, but that's dangerous because there's, like, you know, prions and, like, things that can kill you if you do cannibalism. So the safer thing to do is to compost the rich. Which is also...
Again joking.
It's far more eco-friendly.
Ashley, you are totally going to get MI5 on us. I swear to God, one of these days.
Bold of you to assume I haven't already.
Oh, damn.
I mean, I have literally no idea. Although, to the MI5 guy, if you're checking in on us, hi, Steve, I hope the wife and kids are all right. Anyway.
Oh, I think this heat is making me giddy. Shall we move on to some more specific trans-related cabinet news?
Yes, but it's no better, is it? The news is no better just because it's related specific. Anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah, carry on. Just feel so defeated. It's too hot and the world is burning.
It really is. Okay, let's keep it together.
Yeah, all right. We can do this. All right.
We've been covered in the metro. We're like a real outlet now, Ashley. We've got to get our shit together.
Are. Yeah, totally. We are definitely an outlet for something.
So, according to a report by Pink News, Gender Recognition Act reforms have been delayed again. According to Pink News, now former Minister for Women and Equalities, Penny Mordaunt, told them earlier this month that their plans for reform would be out the door in the next few weeks. But in a statement sent to Pink News, a Government Equalities Office spokesperson said, "It is vital that the next steps on any potential reform of the Gender Recognition Act are carefully planned and have the right backing, so they can have a positive impact on the trans community in the UK. We had more than 100,000 responses to our consultation and have met with 140 organisations to ensure that we have taken into account the views and concerns from all sides of the debate." Love that phrase. Love it.
Absolutely. All sides as well. But the next bit's the kicker, though, isn't it?
Yeah, we will announce more details on our proposed next steps in due course. Don't know when that is.
In due course. Fucking fantastic bit of phrasing there. Well done for them. Well done them for digging it out of the tray.
Yeah, thank you very much, Government Equalities Office, for clearing things up so nicely.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic.
Meanwhile, as a result of Boris Johnson entering Downing Street as Prime Minister and shaking up the cabinet, Amber Rudd returns to the Women and Equalities Minister post, taking over from Penny Mordaunt, who is, in her words, heading to the backbenches. Rudd has previously held the position for a few months back in early 2018, whilst she was also serving as Home Secretary. She was forced to resign both positions at the height of the Windrush scandal and the public outcry over the cruelty inflicted by the Home Office's hostile environment policy, after it was widely reported that Rudd may have misled a parliamentary committee about her knowledge of Home Office deportation quotas. Wow, Home Office deportation quotas. That is just a phrase that just rings of evil, right? I mean,
it very much does. Carry on.
Yep. I urge you, of course, to look into these particular issues around Windrush, the hostile environment, and immigration in general in the UK. And there will be links in the description, because this in itself is a horrifically racist clusterfuck that more people should know about, and this happened under Amber Rudd's watch. She also called Diane Abbott a coloured woman during a BBC radio interview back in March.
Oh, man. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I mean, that's just basically because of the torrent of shit that's been coming just from Johnson. That
was only in March. That was earlier this year. How have I forgotten that?
It's because there's so much of it. It's just a torrent of nonsense. But anyway, so whilst Rudd's history when it comes to race and immigration isn't exactly great, a blog post on her website dated as last being revised on November 2016 said that she was pleased that the government announced it will keep issues such as gender self-declaration under consideration. The Gender Recognition Act will also be reviewed in order to see whether improvements can be made to streamline and demedicalise the gender recognition process. We have reached out to Mrs. Rudd and the Government Equalities Office, asking about a variety of issues, including more details as to why GRA reform has been delayed, whether Amber Rudd's views have changed since the blog post on her website, and if they agree with the Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equalities, Dawn Butler, who told us that the government's handling of GRA reform is a fucking disgrace. Actual quote, Google it, it got picked up in the national press, holy shit. And if the makeup of the new cabinet is a sign that LGBT rights are under threat, is another thing that I asked them. Hey, this is Michelle from the more recent past, just dropping with an update. At the time of recording the episode, we were still waiting for answers from the Government Equalities Office and hoping to get a little more detail on the statement they sent to Pink News. And we got it. We basically heard from them, and from what they've said, the consultation had, in their words, an unprecedented 100,000 responses that they still need to go through, and that they said that they wanted to get it right. This entails making sure all the people in government, including the new Prime Minister, were on the same page. They made it clear to us that this delay had nothing to do with the media backlash, but they wanted to make sure that they heard from all sides. There was a mention of women's groups, and I asked if that included quote-unquote gender-critical groups, and they couldn't give us specifics, but we will be pushing them on this point going forward. In regards to where Amber Rudd stands on GRA reform and trans equality, at time of recording she had been in post as the Minister for Women and Equalities for less than a day, and will get back to us on that. But like we said just now, in the more distant past, the last we heard was that she was in support of GRA reform. They also sent over a statement where they said that the new government is as committed to protecting and improving the rights of LGBT individuals. We will provide the full statement in the description, as always, so you can check it out for yourself. In summary, we have been told that this delay is entirely down to them being careful and wanting to get it right. But I was a little concerned about the potential for the government to be listening to and talking to some seriously transphobic groups and individuals. Obviously, with this kind of thing, they have to listen to the public, but it just doesn't sit right with me that they may have been talking to people who may well be fighting for policies that would unambiguously harm the transgender community, which includes me. With that and the fact that according to the poll we talked about during the main recording of this episode, most Conservative MPs are not on board with GRA reform, which leads me to think that the road is going to get bumpier before it smooths out. Not the best news, but that's enough from me. Back to the past! Shall we move on to the next thing?
Let's move on to the next thing, which it has got a kind of note of not terribleness running through it. So Hacked Off, a group who campaign for better press regulation in the UK. Now, people in the UK are probably slightly familiar with this story, but in brief, newspapers were doing bad things. They hacked people's phones, including hacking the phone of a teenager who had been murdered, and bad things occurred for the paper, and rightly so.
The News of the World, right? That no longer exist.
Correct. So there was a whole inquiry, the Leveson inquiry, and a number of campaign groups sort of sprung up around that time to highlight various things in the press. So Hacked Off are one of these groups, and they have released a damning report on transphobia in the UK's press. The report, which took its title, McCarthyism in Bad Wigs and Fishnets, from a transphobic as hell Lucy Bannerman opinion piece for, of course, The Times, looks specifically at 24 recent media articles that, according to Hacked Off, include serious misrepresentation of the Women and Equality Select Committee report on transgender equality, are otherwise transphobic, or are inaccurate about transgender people to transphobic effect. The report, as we've said, is damning and includes many articles that we here on the show have previously reported on and debunked ourselves, and we do urge you to read this report for yourselves. The link is, of course, in the description. All of our old chums are there: Andrew Gilligan, Rod Liddle, Janice Turner, Lucy Bannerman. And in fact, nearly half the articles came from, who else? The Times and the Sunday Times, with the rest mostly coming from the Mail, the Telegraph, the Sun and the Mirror. The report also claims that the root of media transphobia is the absence of independent regulation for many media outlets in the UK in the style of Ofcom, which is the broadcast media regulator, where they actually have teeth and they're able to issue fines and have some legal powers. Websites and newspapers are not held under the same kind of regulation. Now, there is a voluntary regulatory body that is supposed to regulate the print and online media, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, or IPSO, which is, according to Hacked Off, not independent, as, in their words, most publishers are members of IPSO, which is a newspaper association and complaints handler under the control of newspaper executives. So we have reached out to IPSO to get their take on the report, and they told us that they strongly reject any implication that we do not take this issue seriously. We continue to work to protect the public and uphold high standards of journalism. Well, you are failing if that is your work. They also released a rebuttal to the report on their website, where they claim that Hacked Off report has inaccuracies in regards to IPSO's independence, complaint process, and standards monitoring. They do claim, once again, that they are an independent regulatory body, and whilst they are voluntary, they do have power, and that, again, in their words, are completely independent of government, politicians, our member publishers, or any one wealthy individual. And we also directly reached out to Hacked Off to get their take on the situation with IPSO and trans issues in the print and online media, and what they told us is there is no meaningful regulation of newspapers and websites in the UK. While a system exists for independent regulation, it is entirely optional, and the vast majority of major news publishers have chosen not to sign up. Most are instead members of IPSO, which is not a competent regulator and is subject to extensive industry control. This is the fundamental reason, in our view, for why publishers have been able to get away with all of this disinformation. Now, Hacked Off also very kindly went on to point out what IPSO is incapable of doing, which is namely that IPSO is not able to change its own rules in response to any recommendations without the permission of the newspaper editors, change the standards code it claims to enforce in response to any recommendations without the permission of newspaper editors. So it's a bit of a redundant exercise. It's designed to give the appearance of taking action over the issue whilst fundamentally just failing to do so. The full statements from both IPSO and Hacked Off will be available on our website, so check the links in the description to read the whole thing. So, I say this is slightly good news because it basically means that somebody else kind of, one assumes not entirely within the trans community, which is Hacked Off, has noticed and is doing something about the media transphobia. And that is good news. It is. Because there's an ally there. There's a group of people who have done the research. You can, they've got the receipts, and it's in that report, which obviously, out of necessity, is some very, very tough reading. I would say, if you're going to go through it, the better thing to do is to read the stuff that's been commented at the side rather than the articles themselves, which are, as the report points out, fundamentally bullshit. So what do you think?
It was interesting trying to read the IPSO response and trying to make sense of what they were saying in regards to the Hacked Off report, because there were various points where they said that the Hacked Off report was misleading, but they didn't necessarily say what specifically was misleading. I mean, I think they were trying to say, albeit in quite a vague way, that Hacked Off's view that they are not a regulatory body is inaccurate, and I guess that's true, but at the same time, Hacked Off clearly want a regulatory body that has more power than IPSO has right now. And with the things that Hacked Off have been saying about how they are made, about how IPSO is formed and how it is made, and looking at all the stuff that IPSO have released to us saying how they operate things, it seems to come down to a debate over the semantics over what a regulator actually is.
Which, I mean, it's classic obfuscation, that, isn't it? It's like they're going to say, well, no, we are a regulator because by the dictionary, a regulator is da-da-da, and they'll just try and derail it to avoid talking about anything but the actual core of the issue, which is, why are you fuckers being so grossly transphobic? So
I think it's important to say that IPSO themselves haven't published anything transphobic. in and of itself. They seem to be allowing transphobia to flourish in the media, and it is very, very hard to argue against that point, especially considering all the work that you and I have done for the entire length of this podcast, which has basically been, oh, look, here's the thing in the Times. That's a straight-up lie. We found this out by doing a couple of phone calls, you know? Like, the lies are so obvious. Two relatively undertrained journalists like us have been able to debunk things.
Yeah.
And IPSO have not responded to these things at any speed. Like, recently, the Times retracted and apologized for, in their words, printing misleading things about, I think this was an Andrew Gilligan report from 8 months ago, where he made the claim that there was a court order against Mermaids, the charity for transgender children, to stay away from a particular child, who the child themselves is completely anonymous and we don't know anything about them, as it should be. And that sort of became a fact that was parroted in many different media places over the last 8 months, and only now did IPSO come down and say, no, this is misleading. But by this point, 8 months later, it had become a fact that has been repeated in so many other places, online, in publications and in forums and in turf holes and all over the place, that Mermaids has had a court order saying stay away when that is not true. And Mermaids have been saying it's not true from day one.
Well, so have we.
Yeah, so IPSO have failed to stop, I mean, I'm not gonna mince my words here, a lie from becoming the truth. And that is the exact opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. So it's very, very hard for me to take IPSO's response to the Hacked Off report, or necessarily any things that they say, seriously, because actions speak louder than words, and some of their words that they sent over are quite nice. They do claim to take this very seriously. They do claim to want to do the right thing here, but they just haven't as yet. And I don't see any sign of that changing, because they haven't done the right thing when it comes to Islamophobia in the media. Another one of the things that Hacked Off has been campaigning on. They haven't done anywhere near enough to stop the press from ruining some people's lives, which is why Hacked Off started in the first place. And it like, the press has so much power to basically ruin a life, and then IPSO comes in, and it's too late. The life is already ruined.
Yeah, damage done.
Yeah,
basically.
I would have to see actions at this point. I'd have to see maybe the government stepping in, but according to Hacked Off, David Cameron promised that there would be a more rigorous regulatory body established back in 2013, and that just didn't happen. That just did not happen. We have basically stuck with the same IPSO that was on watch during the hacking scandal and during all of that nonsense with the news of the world. So it's no surprise that transphobia has been allowed to become completely rife in the news media without any real consequences whatsoever.
Pretty much. So, and...
although it has to be said that IPSO are doing an inquiry into the coverage of trans issues in the media. They said to us that this will be released in 2020 at some point.
In due course, yeah.
I mean, they didn't say that, but they pretty much did. Just not using those words. It's... Honestly, I don't necessarily think IPSO have the teeth required to deal with this problem, and it is a problem, and they may well care about the situation, but they just don't have the reach to do anything about it. And, of course, there is the fact that they are a voluntary regulatory body that can be ignored to almost no consequence.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just, like, but it's so clearly a facade. It's like, it's claiming to be a regulatory body. It can't really enforce things. It can't really do very much in terms of compelling. As you say, it's voluntary to sign up to, whatever. To me, it just sounds like a gentleman's club, where the sort of editors of the newspaper say, right, well, let's be independent and then let's, go and have a couple of brandies or whatever, because I assume that's how they talk. I welcome this report, I really do, and it's, very, very difficult to argue with its conclusions, particularly after you've read the stuff in question and considered the evidence, shall we say. So, more like this, please. A bit more allyship. Somebody do something.
And this seems like a perfect good point to mention that we are actually looking for researchers to basically come on board for a couple of hours an episode and to help us out research this stuff, because if IPSO can't, for whatever reason, do it, I think we're just going to have to step up So we need help. We can't pay. We don't get paid for this.
No.
There were many debates over whether we should do this because we don't want to offer people, work for us for exposure. Because to be honest, we don't even have much of that going on. You know what I mean? This is very much a passion project for the both of us, and we need some people to come on board to help us decode this stuff, because even doing the news this time around, there was too much of it to go through with just the two of us, and we couldn't cover all the angles we wanted to. So if you've got a couple of hours every 2 weeks that you can help to decipher some of this nonsense, please get in touch with us. Go to our Twitter @WhatTheTrans and DM us. Go to facebook.com/whatthetrans and messages on there, or go to our website whatthetranspod.tumblr.com, and you can message us on there, and you can email us through there, and come on board. You don't need any experience. We can show you all the things we've learned. I've worked at Pink News. I've done some work in a few other places, so I kind of know a bit about the journalism thing. I can teach you what I know, and we can hopefully debunk some of this stuff a lot faster than IPSO will, because I don't really know if many other people are doing it. Apart from people on Twitter who we follow and respect very much, but I don't know of any other media outlet, except maybe a few of the queer ones like your Pink News, your Gay Star News and stuff like that are doing this kind of work. So come help us out.
Yeah, pretty much. What she said. I am also here, by the way.
Sorry, I did take over.
That's cool.
Sorry, I did take over the thing. But,
do the thing. But yes, you can be a research assistant, and you can be line managed by me. I will use a riding crop. So, I think that's as much as we could say about the news, isn't it? Before we both just start flinging shit around in our rooms. And I don't just mean our possessions, I mean like actual shit, like, crap in your hand and throw it around guerrilla style sort of thing.
I wouldn't do that. I live in London. They took like all my life savings for the deposit for this place. I can't risk that stuff with a bit of poo.
That's fair enough. I wasn't really planning on doing it myself, to be honest. It was just a throwaway statement. God, I am so tired. All right. So, having concluded the news, I think we should crack on with speed to the slightly jollier part of our show, which is Michelle's big Brightonian adventure.
Yeah, so Trans Pride Brighton occurred last weekend at the time of recording. Roughly a week ago on the day that this comes out. Trans Pride Brighton is usually my favourite of the prides because it's one of the few, maybe even one of the only ones, I don't know for sure, where you start with an actual fucking protest, which feels so good because you were there last year. This year was very similar. Yeah. Only this year I was more at the front of the thing because this year I had a media pass which let me go up into the Marlborough. And basically, for people who don't know, at the start of Trans Pride Brighton, it starts outside the Marlborough pub in Brighton, which is a legendary place amongst Brightonians. It is classically like a gay women's sort of bar, but it's also very, very trans inclusive, and that tends to be where the march starts. The people that organise it, the committee members, hang around upstairs and do speeches at the beginning. So I was allowed access into that, so I could see it from a totally different perspective, and I saw it from the front. And it was glorious, as usual, because there's lots and lots of good shouts, a lot of good chants, a lot of people beeping their horns in support, an equal amount of people looking on just being thoroughly confused as to why there were thousands and thousands of trans people just marching, screaming, "Whose streets are streets? Whose streets are streets?" I tried to get a chant started. You'll be glad to know that it didn't work. My chant was, "I don't know what you've been told. Boris Johnson, fuck that noise." It was barely a rhyme, and it got the response it deserved.
What do you mean barely? That's not even slightly.
In my defence, I am less of the activist than you are. I'm not as experienced with the old protest game as you, but
it's about rhyming couplets. It's
I don't
like
know. I'm not fucking Shakespeare here.
So.
I could barely write a news report thing, as we have discovered during this episode.
Honestly, having a chant is not necessarily, it's not mandatory, is it? Like, if you want to get all wordsmithy, you can also make a sign.
That's a good point. And I mean, I can be a protest as a body. I can make up the numbers, but I will submit to the leadership for the chants, and I'll submit to you because this is very much your area and not mine. But needless to say, the protest angle of it is something I really enjoy because, all year I report on this stuff with you, and I get all worked up about it and stuff. And, sometimes I can vent on the show, but there's nothing like venting in a crowd of thousands. Just nothing like it.
And everybody is also venting about largely the same things with you. It's like, it's so cathartic, isn't it?
But this is the one that is closest to me, I believe, and the one that I am very much aware of. And probably the biggest trans-exclusive event in the UK and probably Europe. I mean, that's what Caroline Lucas said in her speech, but we'll get to that very shortly. But yeah, I think
indeed
overall it was a good one. Here is Caroline Lucas's speech in full from the top of the Marlborough.
I just want to welcome you to the biggest trans pride event in the whole of Europe. Thank you so much for being here. It is amazing to see how this event has grown and grown. And I am so proud that our city was home to the first ever trans pride in the UK 7 whole years ago. Celebrate everything that the trans community has achieved since then, but also to recommit ourselves to challenging the hatred and the stigma and the discrimination that still exists. Because friends, you will know the shocking statistics. That here, even in Brighton and Hove, the number of transphobic hate incidents and crimes was up over 40% last year. Right. And nationally the figure was up over 80%. Friends, those figures are horrifying, and even more horrifying that Stonewall says that a staggering 4 in 5 anti-LGBTIQA crimes still go unreported. But that's why it's so important that we're here to say we will not accept people being attacked simply for being who we are. We will not accept a media that all too often is still so divisive and damaging and distracting when it comes to the portrayal of trans people. We are proud that Brighton and Hove is a city of sanctuary, and that should mean that everyone feels safe here, and that we call out prejudice wherever we find it. I want to say a word about something I've been working on with fellow MPs from all parties in Parliament, and that is to achieve compulsory PSHE education in all of our schools. And quite simply, we are here to say that when it comes to teaching LGBTQIA education, friends, there should be no opting out for anyone. Should be able to learn about the diversity that exists and makes our world so beautiful. Trans Pride is here to say that we are proud to celebrate trans people in all of your joyous beauty. Just 2 more quick things to say. The first is to say that I have heard so much in my constituency surgeries about the difficulties of applying for legal gender recognition. It is a long, difficult and hugely intrusive process with so many barriers for trans people. And that's why I'm proud to support reform of the Gender Recognition Act so that it is simpler and does not ever require medical evidence. Friends, I just want to say I'm proud that it was Green councillors who established the first trans equality scrutiny panel in this city on the council back in 2012. That work was groundbreaking. It shone a light on issues that trans people face on a daily basis, from bullying in schools to hate crimes, from discrimination in housing and employment and health. And as a result of that, we are now seeing some significant changes. The first health action plan to include the trans community, a toolkit for our city's teachers to educate pupils about transphobia, and working with Sussex Police to improve hate crime reporting. And just a few weeks ago, the council voted to make sure that all councillors will now receive trans awareness training. So I know you want to get on with your march. Let me just say, there is strength in hope. And despite the challenges we all face, I find so much hope among you today and in this city. I'm so proud to walk with you in solidarity. Tolerance is not enough. Trans rights are human rights. Thank you for being here in all of your glorious beauty to celebrate who you are. Thank you.
So with Caroline Lucas, there was a bit of a, I would say controversy, but I don't know, it feels like that word has been overused in a lot of ways. There has been a lot of debate about where Caroline Lucas stands on trans issues inside the trans community, because last year she did go and meet with Women's Place UK. For people who don't know, they are the more polished end of the anti-trans hate movement. They are very much a hate group in my eyes in the way that they function and the way they work, but a lot of the mainstream cis world isn't necessarily aware of that, and they sort of can fall for it, because Women's Place UK have a very very slick website. They look shiny, and they use euphemisms wonderfully. Like, we could probably learn a lot from them when it comes to PR stuff.
Yeah. But I'm not happy about that, but it's probably true.
I'm not happy about it. Believe me, I am not happy about it, but that's the situation. So Caroline Lucas went to meet with them last year, and there was some debate over whether this means that her, and by extent the Green Party, would sort of moving away from the trans community.
There'd been concern about that in the past as well, hadn't there, from the actions of other Green Party members. But yes, she did sort of...
Well, she basically said there unequivocally that she is with the trans community. I also managed to speak to her one-on-one just before she did the speech, and we'll get to that in a second. But next up, Charlie Martin is someone that you may not have heard that much about. I had not heard of her before I met her on the day. And she's basically a transgender woman who is a race car driver. And to my shame, I did not know anything about her before meeting her. And I went up to her and said, I have no idea about racing cars or what kind of car you drive. And honestly, I completely missed that you existed, but I'm very, very glad you do. And please come on the show at some point. And once you hear the speech, you will hear why.
Hello, beautiful people. How excited are you to be at Trans Pride right now? In the sunshine. It's an amazing feeling to be here with you all today. This has got to be the biggest crowd I've ever seen at Trans Pride. You should all be incredibly proud of yourselves to be here as your true, authentic selves today, right now. How good does it feel to be here, coming together as a community? Seriously, the view from up here is like, I've never seen anything like this. It's incredible. I wasn't able to make it to Trans Pride last year, and to be honest, to be here right now, sharing this moment with you, feels even more incredible. It feels even more special for me to be here today. A lot has changed for me in the last 12 months, and I'll be honest, a year ago I would never have had the confidence to stand here and with a microphone and speak to so many people. I'm choking on my hair. And so I feel really privileged to share this moment with you all today. Last year was a really huge year for me. Something big happened in my life and it taught me a really important lesson. I came back to race in the UK for the first time in 3 years. Nobody in motorsport knew who I was, nobody knew a thing about me, and I decided that if I'm going to tell people who I am, then I want them to know that I'm trans. Because we should never have to hide who we really are. We have every right to be proud of our identities, whether that's where we work, where we study, where we go to school, where we play sport, anywhere. And motorsport shouldn't be any different. But it is a male-dominated sport. There's very little visible diversity, and that's something I want to try and change. And so coming out last year within motorsport on Trans Day of Visibility, I was really scared, if I'm honest. I didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know how people would react to me. I didn't know what impact it was going to have on my career. And it was a leap of faith. It really was a journey into the unknown. But you know what? It was the best thing that I could ever have done. Because it's a chance to make a real impact. Because I truly believe that visibility is the key to creating real change, real positive change in the world. And so since January last year, it's January this year even, it's been an incredible opportunity to work with Stonewall and to have their support and to try and have more of an impact, to try and do more, to change the sport, to be seen in the media, to be doing things that can change people's hearts and minds. And I'm really proud to say as well today, for the first time, I'm very, very excited. I'm very proud to be working as a patron with mermaids. It means a huge amount to me to be supporting the incredible work that they're doing with parents and families to empower and change lives. And can we just get a huge cheer for mermaids right now, please? When I think back to when I was 13 years old and I wrote Mermaids a letter, and back then, how I was, a very frightened, scared teenager, feeling trapped, feeling that there was something wrong with me, and unable to take control of my life. And the impact that having a letter come back from them made on me, saying, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with being trans. It's society that needs to change. And that's why we're here today, because every one of you is having an impact through being here together, standing here in this crowd, being your true, authentic self, and it's an incredible feeling to be with you all right now. Today is about celebrating our bodies, celebrating our identities, celebrating our minds, and celebrating our right to be who we are. Not just to be accepted, but to live our lives without limitation. If you have a dream, go out there and get it. Believe it's yours for the taking. Live the life that you want to live. And have an amazing, beautiful, happy and sunny Trans Pride 2019.
She's fantastic. Like, she has gone into, the boys' club that is, motorsport, and is kicking ass and totally speaking out for trans people in an area where she may be the only voice. Like, there was that famous race car driver from the 50s.
Roberta Cowell, yeah, who was also a Spitfire pilot before that, so thrill seeker.
Yeah, there is a tradition of trans women who are fucking incredible and risking death just for the fun of it. She's someone I'd very much like to talk to more in depth at some point, but unfortunately I didn't really get the chance because once the march started, she was gone. She was off having a whale of a time, and I was on the other side of things, and that was that. But I promise you, listeners, if it's entirely possible, I will get Charlie on the show because she is great. Just before the speeches, I managed to get a couple of minutes with Caroline Lucas, and here's what she had to say. Caroline Lucas, thank you so much for talking to me on Trans Pride Brighton Day.
Thank you for having me.
How is it for you so far? I mean, it's barely started.
It's barely started, but I can't tell you, just everywhere there is a sea of rainbows. I was really pleased as well to see that even the rail company has got its act together with a special train with the rainbow livery on it. There's a real sense of pride and celebration in the city today, and that's exactly how it should be.
So, So, why are you here today? How important do you think it is for people in your position to support the trans community?
I think it's massively important because although today is a day of celebration, it's also a day of recognising that although we've come a long way, there's still a hell of a long way to go. And when you read, as I did just a few weeks ago, the fact that hate crimes against the trans community are actually up. I mean, sometimes in Brighton and Hove we think we're in this lovely bubble, that everyone is loving and welcoming, and by and large they are, but even here hate crimes are up by over 40%. Nationally it's up by over 80%. So there is still a huge amount to do to challenge discrimination and prejudice and stigma. So I think today's that kind of combination both of kind of celebrating people having the right to be who they are, but at the same time recognising that the policy process and the culture, if you like, still has a way to go.
Cool. A while back you met up with the people from Women's Place UK. How was that? And do you think they have a point? Do you prescribe to their views?
I met with them because I think it's important as the MP to listen to all views, and I will always listen to all views. It was clear that I didn't see eye to eye with Women's Place on a number of issues. I understand where they're coming from. I understand that they are worried that spaces that they have fought for to be cis women owned, if you like, I understand why they feel threatened, but I don't think they need to feel threatened, and I think that women's spaces have been and should be available to all self-identifying women.
So the other day, Hacked Off released a document, basically a big report detailing all of the different ways that the media have been, if I'm going to be generous, they have misrepresented the trans community, misrepresented GRA reform. And they make the point that IPSO, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but they're basically IPSO are unwilling or unable to do anything about it. Do you think this is where the government or anybody in Parliament should step in and try and give IPSO some teeth on the issue?
I absolutely think IPSO needs some teeth, and right from the start we always said that it would need those teeth, that it wasn't given. And I think I think you are being generous when you say misrepresented, because the media has such an important role to play really in terms of shaping people's understanding and views. And when you've got a media that so often is so divisive, so damaging, so destructive when it comes to the representation of trans people, then it's got to be one of the first targets, I think, for us to get right, because once there is fair and true reporting, then other things I think will follow from that.
Brilliant. Caroline, thank you so much for talking to me. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride to you.
That was interesting. Given what we mentioned just before the interview, what did you think?
Well, I was very nervous in asking about the Women's Place meeting because it was something I had to ask. It was something I absolutely had to ask about, because it's something that has been preying on my mind ever since that occurred. But it's not usually very, very nice to go up to someone and basically say to someone who especially has turned up at Trans Pride Brighton and has made it repeatedly clear over and over again that they are with the trans community, to basically sort of say, so, you went to meet with a hate group, how was that? It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I suppose.
But I had to go for it. And to be fair, I know that her response may not be completely pleasing for a lot of people, because they correctly identify Women's Place UK as a hate group, which is something I very much agree with. They operate as a hate group. But like I said before, a lot of cis people aren't on that page yet. That's a major problem in itself that we should talk about dealing with. But politically, I can see exactly why she went and did it.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one when you're talking about, because you kind of want to believe that such a nice, seemingly nice person as that would be on your side. It's like, I get it about how having to hear sort of different points of view, and I guess it's kind of refreshing to hear that she's very much not on board with what they're selling, which I think she made reasonably clear. So but yeah, nicely done though. Obviously, as you say, you did have you had to do that, and it kind of sucked, obviously. But that's the question, isn't it? What else would a trans podcast be asking her about?
I think it sort of also strengthens her claim to be an ally, because she has basically done
the work, I suppose.
Yeah, she has gone and talked to the people that on the surface don't claim to have a problem with trans people, but everything they advocate would suggest otherwise. She went there, she heard them out, and so if she can go there and hear them, and then come to the decision that trans people actually do need self-ID and do need protecting from the hostile media environment, using Dawn Butler's phrasing, which is, again, she came very much on the side of, IPSO needs reform, IPSO needs teeth, there needs to be more regulation on this matter. Basically, she can be an ally that we can point to now and say, well, Caroline went and met with these people, and clearly they didn't have anything worth selling. Yeah. So,
yeah,
in respects, I think that her allyship is very much required and very much now has another wrinkle to it that is very, very cool to hear, especially, because it's just nice to hear somebody who is an MP for Brighton and Hove for the Green Party, who is very much on our side, and we need MPs like that because, like I mentioned before, the vast majority of the Conservative MPs are not on side with GRA reform or trans rights in general, but most of the SNPs in Parliament, at least in, the Parliament in London, most of the Labour Party and all the Lib Dems, to give them credit, are on our side, and it's always good to hear that. So I thank you for your allyship, Caroline Lucas. That was pretty good.
But next, it's like, this is one for the nerds, I think, isn't it?
And one very much for me, because I am quite a fan of this person's work. I managed to run into Laura Kate Dale, who is a video game writer. She has recently gone independent after she wrote for Kotaku as a news reporter for years and years and years on video game stuff. She's now gone independent. She's written a whole bunch of books. She's doing a whole bunch of podcasts, including one of my favorites now, the Jimquisition, which is Jim Sterling's video game podcast, which I really like because, one, there's a trans woman in it, and two, they don't shy away from the idea of, trans people being in video game spaces. They don't. Basically, it aligns very, very closely to my sensibilities when it comes to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, which isn't as rare as you would like in the video game podcasting world, so it is something I would thoroughly recommend because I've been enjoying it tremendously recently.
Isn't as common as you'd like.
Yeah, that's the phrasing.
Sorry. Yeah, well, because it, isn't as rare as you like. It kind of makes it sound like, we're advocating for the other thing. Sorry. Anyway.
You're exactly right. I'm gonna leave that in just as a testament to how scrambled my brain is in this heat.
That's fair enough. Now let's play.
Let's play the interview.
The tape. Yeah.
Hello, Laura Kate Dale. Nice to meet you.
Hello, person that I've just met right now. How are you?
I'm good.
Hello, Michelle.
So, how has it been so far for you?
Trans Pride has been wonderful so far today. It was threatening to be a bit miserable with all the rain this morning, but it's really brightened up. The march was great as ever. It's always good to just get a good bit of protest chanting happening, and we're all in Brunswick Gardens now, and as ever, it's just a lovely chance to relax and just feel very peaceful and at ease. It's been a lovely day.
It really has. And you were just sat at the stall of your publisher, and all your books sold out.
Indeed, they all sold out really quickly.
Do you want to tell us about the book?
Yeah, Uncomfortable Labels, My Life as a Gay Autistic Trans Woman. It's a book about living at the intersection of being trans and on the autism spectrum. Autism spectrum status and trans status overlap really commonly, and just no one really talks about it. Around 8 to 10% of people who go for gender dysphoria assessments are also on the autism spectrum, and that's about 8 to 10 times the general population rate. So, there's something going on there. So I basically wrote a book about my experience about some of the ways that those things interlink and that they can make things a bit more challenging. And ultimately, it's a very positive book, but it just talks about the interlinking of those two intersecting personality areas.
So you got your start writing about video games and stuff for various places, Destructoid, Kotaku, and all of that. Go on. I know that there's a lot of trans women out there that want to get where you are. How did you do it?
Perseverance and ignoring all of the shitty people online who will say shitty things about you. I know people talk about the phrase having a thick skin, and you should never have to, but it's a reality. As soon as I started getting on big gaming websites, there are entire forums with 100-page long threads about hating me. But you just have to look at those and go, you know what? Screw it. I'm great. They're just jealous. Keep doing what you love. And if you persevere with any creative endeavour like this, you'll get there eventually.
Sweet. Swinging back to Trans Pride, how important do you think it is to have an event like this where, it's barely corporate, and it's very much a protest with lots of shouting and bellowing? How important do you think that is?
Oh, so important. I love the occasional good corporate pride, It can be nice to feel very surrounded by loving, supportive energy, but it's very important to have stuff like Trans Pride Brighton. The fact that it's largely volunteer funded and run, the fact that they keep police outside of the park, things like this, they really go out of their way to, A, have a unified message, which is, hey, trans rights are human rights, let's march through the streets, take up space with that message, but also, like, provide a unified space for everyone to be afterwards. It's a much-needed event, not only for getting a message across, but also just for the people that are here. It's unlike quite any other Pride around the country.
Yeah, it really is. Like, a lot of fun doing some bellowing along the seafront today. A lot of fun.
Good shouts.
So you've recently gone independent. You are officially freelance, I guess?
I guess that's it, yeah.
Do you want to plug anything that's coming up for you?
Oh, I do too many things. Uncomfortable Labels, that's the book. I've got another book coming out, Things I Learned from Mario's Butt. It's an illustrated coffee table book about video game character butt reviews. Dice Funk, it's a Dungeons & Dragons podcast. I'm on seasons 3 through 6. patreon.com/Laura K. Buzz. That's where all of my stuff I make goes. I'm probably forgetting a bunch of projects, but I remembered those ones.
And I will link to almost as much of everything that Laura Kate does, that I can in the description of this podcast.
I apologise, I do too many things.
No, keep doing all the things. Laura, thank you so much for talking to me. So that was Laura Kate Dale. She is particularly astonishing. I will link to all the different things she does in the description. You should check all of them out. And she says she does too many things. I'd argue that she does the exact right amount of things, because in the video game writer space and in the general writer space, there aren't many autistic trans women doing what she does. In fact, I'm pretty sure she may be the only one. Although I am willing to be corrected if you happen to be an autistic trans woman or an autistic trans person who writes about video games. Please do give me a message on the Twitter and I will totally follow you, because I love my video games and would love to hear more trans voices talking about that kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, she's pretty great. Her book sold out. She took a bunch to basically sign at the stall at Trans Pride, and they all disappeared in half an hour. Like, we arranged to meet up at the stall at some point that day. She was expecting to be sat there all day. So I was going to go around do interviews and pop round when I got the chance. And I popped round there and I talked to somebody at the store and they were like, well, the book's sold out, so now Laura's just gone off into Trans Pride to have a good time.
Oh no. Yeah, and this was the moment you realised you had to go on a quest.
Well, I did stumble on her when I was giving out leaflets for the show, and I was just handing out leaflets and realised, oh, this lady with blue hair is the person I have been kind of looking for. So that's a lucky coincidence. So
yes. There we go.
She gave me a few minutes to, in the middle of her relaxing time, to talk to me. So thanks, Laura, and everyone should check out everything she does because she's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the place I work, job, MIF, 2 years ago, there was a series of talks called Interdependence, which Laura Kate Dale actually participated in. I think she did, I think it was a panel discussion. Again, that one was all a bit of a blur as well. Even though I wasn't working there at the time, I was just involved. I am so sorry about all the yawning. It's very distracting. But yes, absolutely, check out her podcasting and writing, because it's just really good, and it's good to see, and also all the good representation stuff. So yeah, Laura Kate Dale, hi babes, we love you. Thanks.
And go and buy her book, Uncomfortable Labels, My Life as a Gay Autistic Trans Woman, available where all good books are sold. So up next, I was wandering around the Trans Pride Brighton Park, which was just full of all sorts of stalls from all sorts of very interesting causes and stuff, some that we have talked about before, some that we haven't, and one of the ones that we haven't is Gendered Intelligence, who are an organisation that do a whole bunch of stuff for trans youth. Because, mermaids get all the press, but they are by far not the only ones who deal with that kind of thing. Whilst Gendered Intelligence don't handle the parent side of things, they basically put on a lot of events for young trans people to get involved with, because, being young and trans can be quite isolating, so they put on these events all over the country where young trans people can get together and do a whole bunch of things. Like, when I first came out, I was very much in the age bracket that they handle, and I personally went and did some life drawing. So I life drew a bunch of trans people, and it was terrific fun.
And much later it transpired. Well, I actually did some of that life modelling for Gendered Intelligence, although Michelle and I have worked out previously that it wasn't the same session. So sadly, Michelle did not draw me like one of her French girls. But yes, I have done the life modelling thing with Gendered Intelligence, and subsequently in my volunteering, being a gobby trans person activist shit, I have obviously, I don't know what the term is, spoken to, used the resources of / worked with, to some extent, people from Gendered Intelligence, and they're a good bunch.
Yeah, they really are, and it would have been really strange if it had turned out I had drawn you in the buff years before actually meeting you properly. That would have been very strange.
I know, but it would be awesome, wouldn't it? We should just pretend that that's true, so...
All right, let's rewrite history. Let's do a Trump. Basically, I drew you in the buff a couple of years before I met you.
Wonderful. Fake news, not on this podcast. Anyway, I think let's play the tape with Cassie, shall we?
Yeah, so I talked to Cassie, who is a volunteer with Gendered Intelligence, and we spoke about a whole bunch of things. Here they are. Cassie from Gendered Intelligence, thank you so much for joining me today. How is Pride for you?
Hi, Michelle. Yes, it's really good. We're having an incredible time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today about all the work that Gendered Intelligence has been doing for so long.
What are you pushing here today? What's the big thing that you're working on right now?
We're trying to raise awareness for what Gendered Intelligence is trying to do, in the sense of we're trying to bring advocates to different academic fields, so such as universities, also offices and other workplaces, schools, to try and raise awareness of the trans community and maybe try and help people who aren't trans understand how best to work with trans people, maybe just cover any topics that may be of concern or understanding, just sort of fill in any holes that may still need filling.
So is there a big problem in academic circles when it comes to trans awareness and stuff like that?
I think there's still quite a big leap that needs to be taken in schools, especially schools and universities, because nowadays, even though kids are being taught more about what LGBT stands for, there's still quite a lot more that needs to be done so that people understand what is and isn't acceptable to say, how to best forge your friendships with, or relationships in general with trans people, and how best to, what pronouns to use, and how to approach any topics that may be sensitive.
How can people listening help? Like, is there anywhere that they can fling some money, or is there something they can share?
I suppose I would suggest particularly going onto the Gendered Intelligence website. I believe it's genderedintelligence.org.uk, but I will double check that for you. But I do believe they take donations, and they're always taking on volunteers as well. They have full induction trainings, which I took back in January. Met some wonderful people, and they start you off with doing some general sort of admin work to try and get an idea of what it is that we're all about and what we're trying to achieve. But you also have the option for doing something really cool, which is every year in summertime there is a camp for the trans youth to go to. So you will have some youth workers going, trying to get everybody involved and having a good time, and trying to make the camp feel like a safe place for the younger generation. So that they can feel safe and like they can be comfortable in their own skin. And they can have lots of secret midnight feasts. I mean, yeah. Wouldn't you?
Oh, I did. There's a reason why I've gotten so tubby. Cassie, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a good rest of the day.
And you. If you like the cut of Gendered Intelligence's jib, and you totally should, then go check out their website. Go check out all the links in the description. You will be able to volunteer with them, donate money, help out in all the different ways that they are looking for. So go do it, because they're a good bunch. It's not just mermaids who are amazing. Gendered Intelligence are equally as amazing.
Yes, do the thing. Get involved. And as I said, so they've written some stuff. There have been various reports that they've assisted with that are actually quite useful as resources in terms of like education and or, setting up policy or research and blah, blah, blah. So, yes. So, who's next?
Well, basically, I talked to a couple of friends of mine. We have played their music on the show before. They are The Spirits. They are a two-person band based in London, and I actually know them from a while back because when I first came out, in my building, I was walking around, and this woman came up to me and said, "Excuse me, but are you trans?" And I was like, "Yes." And it turned out she was trans too, and I had no idea. I would never have known that she was trans too. She was Vanessa. She lived 2 floors above me, and we became great friends. and we stayed in touch over the years. And then this year, her band with Steve, aka The Spirits, were second headliner on the main stage. So I took them to one side and had a very quick conversation with them, and here it is.
Nice.
Vanessa and Steve, The Spirits, thank you for talking to me. You just played a blinder on the main stage. How was it for you?
Oh, thank you so much. No, it was brilliant. It's always brilliant. We came here last year and we played in an earlier slot. I was on cajon, Steve doing his usual thing, but I don't know, this year I've been trying something new on the drums. We've been playing for a little while, so it's the first big audience that I've played in front of. No, it's amazing. It's always amazing. There's so many people here, so many different people. It's just like beautiful, you know. It's just such a powerful day. It's amazing. Like really. Yeah.
Like, as a person that came out, I think they described your band as anti-folk.
Yeah.
Is that what you would describe it as?
It's difficult to say exactly. That's the kind of a term which we'd like to use, to kind of is the nearest to what we do. Although the kind of music we play is kind of more, has got kind of jazzy chords. Sometimes the lyrics are a bit Noel Coward, which isn't really very kind of like gritty. But it's as near as we can get. You know, we're just one percussionist, one kind of like melodic instrument player, one voice, and that's. But I think that carries it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think at the moment we're kind of in transition from sorry, but no, kind of from sort of doing the more cajon-based thing, which a lot of people when they see us play, they kind of think, oh, you know, folk duo kind of thing, but then we tend to be, you know, kind of do the punky thing.
What does Brighton Trans Pride mean to you?
I don't know, especially at the moment, you know, we've had so much, I don't know, it's like every single day you look at any sort of social media or anything or anywhere, it's just like, you know, constant pressure. I think like it's just, again, like it's like this every year really. It gets bigger and bigger every year as well, but it's just so beautiful to come out of your normal life. Everyone's, you know, struggling, trying to do what they do, you know, just get by really. And then to come to a place where there's just so many people together. I've never seen so many trans folk and like non-binary folk in one place together, which is amazing. You know, we usually spend our time kind of wandering around, hoping that no one's going to give us shit, or you know, trying to just get by. So you know, yeah, it's just a beautiful thing, and it's beautiful to come somewhere and feel so comfortable. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're at, or whatever. It's just yeah. It's the way things should be everywhere, and life would be a lot better. You know.
I know what you mean. I always get a thing after leaving Trans Pride Brighton, we're just like, oh man, real world doesn't come close.
Exactly. It's I don't know, some of the people, I don't know, in the terms, it's just like, you know, why?
Yeah.
why expend the effort? Things could be so nice, and it could be so, you know, just, you know, all these beautiful people. I think as well, the other thing about when you come to, I didn't get to the march today, I was in the march last year, but I think it's so wonderful to see all these beautiful people here today together, and there's so much power in who they are, and it's just, yeah, it's beautiful. If everybody realised how much power they have and how beautiful they are, you know, like we're changing things and we're making things different, we're breaking boundaries, and we're, you know, and people should realise that and how beautiful it is.
So where can people find your music, The Spirits?
So you can go to soundcloud.com/The Spirits, THEESPIRITS, facebook.com/The Spirits, THEESPIRITS. Also, there is a website, thespirits.uk. So in this case, it's The Spirits rather than The Spirits. Thespirits.uk, and there's all links to many videos that we've done are all on there. And,
cool, I'll provide links in the description. Vanessa, Steve, The Spirits, thanks for chatting me today.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So I want to apologise for some of the sound quality on that one. As you know, we are a very, very low-budget DIY podcast, and this particular Pride was quite small, quite well populated, and on the seafront, which meant that there was a lot more wind to deal with than usual. But I do not feel that took away from the power of Vanessa's words. She is damn right, like, in a lot of ways, Trans Pride Brighton is a special event that needs protecting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's not much more to it than that, because it's so important to make those spaces. A couple of the people that we've interviewed have talked about Trans Pride Brighton as, you know, somewhere where you kind of really feel safe and involved and welcome. You talked about it just before, you know, we sort of started introducing these interviews. And yeah, because we've had to kind of fight to create that space in the first place, we absolutely have to protect it. So yeah, Love it. Vanessa and Steve sound cool.
Yeah, they are very, very cool. Vanessa and Steve were definitely the kind of people that when I was at uni, I would see them across the room and be thoroughly intimidated by, but they are so lovely and so welcoming. And I'm probably going to go around to their place next week and have some dinner. So,
Lovely. Well,
yeah,
excellent.
Good people, very nice people. I will provide links in the description. I thoroughly encourage you to check out their music. I like that they were referred to as anti-folk.
Yes, I mean, so you kind of get why they were given their music, but that is a description I have heard a few times for a couple of other acts, anti-folk, which is like, you're kind of subverting something. Yeah,
there's a lot of their music where, like, you could be mistaken for thinking that they are slightly off-key. But then that is by design, and it makes for some very, very, very interesting music that I am very into. Not just because they happen to be friends of mine, but just because they're good. Like, they're on my phone now. They're in my rotation. Yeah. And so up next, I talk to Nikki and Andy from the English Prostitutes Collective. Now, to our sort of shame, we haven't covered the sex worker angle on this show yet, have we? Not in any real depth.
No, I think we've kind of spoken about it from a perspective, I think, but I don't think we've gone into it in any detail, which, I mean, we have talked about it behind the scenes, like, we really should do that. But, so yes, this is an interesting listen, actually, so go on.
Yeah, Nikki did one of the speeches at the beginning of Pride, and I was like, well, I got to get them. I got to talk to these people because they're so passionate, they are so knowledgeable, and they care because this is something that has affected them directly. And again, apologise for the audio quality. The wind, again, was a complete enemy to us. But listen closely and check it out. Hello, Nikki and Andy. Thank you for talking to me. So you are here with the English Prostitutes Collective. Is that right?
English Collective of Prostitutes.
English Collective of Prostitutes. My apologies. So, what are you doing at Trans Pride Brighton?
Well, it's very important for us to have a presence at Trans Pride in Brighton because, Pride itself was founded by sex workers of colour who were trans women, and it's very important to remember that. Partly because trans women of colour who are sex workers suffer some of the most horrific crimes against sex workers. So it's very important for us to be here to support that community. Also because there are many of us that are trans sex workers, and for various reasons we live on the poverty lines, and
So true. There's a lot in common between trans people and sex workers. We suffer very high levels of violence, which is made worse by illegality and stigma and discrimination. And suffer, people go into sex work because of poverty, and that's true of trans sex workers as well, who suffer much higher rates of homelessness and, are often very low income because you're kept out of other jobs. And so, it's a very important connection for us because we also want to be, to make it clear that we stand with our trans sisters. Those of us that assist, we stand with our trans sisters because so much of feminism has been tainted by this vicious hate campaign against trans people, and we're absolutely determined to disassociate, to stand against that, because they are not part of any women's movement. They are not part of our movement. They are with the forces of repression and bigotry. And people talk about a split in feminism, but it's not a split in feminism. There's no such feminism that is hostile and abusive to any woman. It should be about defending all women, including trans women and sex workers.
Yeah. I think it's also very important to acknowledge that you can't be anti-racist, you can't be anti-transphobe, you can't be anti-poverty, etc. without being pro-sex work. They all go hand in hand. So for you to say, I support trans people, I'm anti-racist, but to go against sex workers is in and of itself wrong, and you're just playing into white supremacy. That's basically it. And I think it's very important to remember that. And swerves, turfs, they are not a part of feminism. They're not feminists, and they basically profit from writing about sex workers and trans people.
But also we have a really urgent case and demand for decriminalisation. We have to get the laws off our back. It makes it much more dangerous for sex workers to work. Many people end up in prison. I mean, that is really not even known or heard. Thousands of sex workers a year are threatened with arrest and threatened with raids and end up in prison because of breaching these very repressive orders that they impose on people, particularly women working on the street. And that is a very urgent situation because the laws make it much more dangerous for us to work. So we need to rally everybody to that cause at the moment. That is a change that absolutely has to happen. We have a campaign at the moment called Make All Women Safe, which is about the injustice of the laws that force us to work in isolation. We have a petition which has got 12,000 signatures at the moment, and we need more. Please support us.
Links in the description, guys. Thank you very much. So yeah, what do you think? What was your take on the conversation?
I mean, yeah, chiming in with you is like they are absolutely bang on. There are people who I have known and currently know who, for one reason or another, are engaging in sex work. And I also know a couple of people who work for another sex worker organisation, which is National Ugly Mugs here in Manchester. And so I've kind of met those people through the activism in the other things, because some of the people that work at those organisations are themselves LGBT or whatever. So it absolutely is something disproportionately, I think, a lot of trans women turn to out of necessity. But at the same time, there is nothing shameful about that choice to do that. And, it has to be talked about maturely rather than just saying, well, no, sex work is not real work and it should be criminalised. Because sex work is work. It is, all right? So, it's the oldest profession. It is filling a need. And I'm just going to say, more power to Andy and Nikki. Soldier on. Love it. It's because work is so necessary, but you can imagine also quite draining to be activisming in that particular corridor.
I think I'm going to link in the description to yet another Philosophy Tube video on this, because Ollie Thorne, friend of the show, did a whole wonderful video on sex work that breaks a whole lot of things down in a very, very easily digestible way. And myself, I have never done the sex work thing myself, and I haven't really met that many people who have. I've known a few people, but it's very much a black spot in my knowledge when it comes to this kind of thing, because it's not something I've had to deal with directly. But his video definitely helped me understand a lot of the issues, and I also linked to all of the stuff related to the English Collective of Prostitutes, so you can follow more and find out for yourself if you are as ignorant on the issue as I have been in the past. And I would encourage you to do so, because it's something that may at some point affect you. It's probably, in fact, almost definitely affected people that you know and love, and it's a situation where there are some horrific laws about it that just shit on the most vulnerable people, and it's not right. And I wish that there was more spaces at Prides around for groups like the English Collective of Prostitutes to be involved. Like, I didn't see anything about that kind of thing at many of the Prides I've been to recently. That's not saying they weren't there, I just didn't see it.
I think some of that might be a level of respectability politics on the part of some of the Pride, saying, oh, no, we're not going to make a big thing out of that, or we're not going to have that at our Pride, as may well have happened in some cases.
Whereas this lot were leading Trans Pride Brighton. They were one of the first groups, which shows again how important Trans Pride Brighton is and how special it is, the thing that they do.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, that's where they should have been, front and center, because that's one of the key issues where trans people specifically are extremely marginalized and extremely vulnerable and really at risk. So yeah. Anyway, we should probably boogie on to the next bit.
So up next, we've been referencing this all throughout, that there were certain issues this year around race.
Yes.
Basically, last year and in previous years at Trans Pride Brighton, there is usually a Cutie Parker queer trans people of colour area where they have speakers and they can talk about issues that affect them uniquely, and it also helps to make people of colour in the trans and queer communities feel more included. And it's something that I wasn't aware of the importance of, because I would go to Trans Pride Brighton and I would feel incredible going, because I'm surrounded by thousands of people that look like me. I feel completely at ease. And turns out that feeling is not as easily accessible to people of colour as it is for me.
Funny that,
exactly. So that was quite upsetting for me to hear in a number of ways, because, in some respects, I need Trans Pride Brighton. I need my yearly re-up of that.
Yeah.
And the idea that some people in the community don't have that, it was infuriating, to say the least, for me to learn this thing. But to this year, basically, there are a number of issues that meant that a QT-POC area just didn't happen.
Yeah. It was notably absent.
It was notably absent, and this started a little pushback on social media before it happened. I talked to a number of people about it at the time, and basically what I got from people of colour before the event was that there has been a history in queer spaces where if things get tough with organising it, people of colour-centred stuff tends to be the first that gets cut. And that isn't exactly what happened, according to some of the organisers that I talked to, but that doesn't change the end result that this year there was not a queer trans people of colour area as there has been in previous years. And that, you can definitely call that for what it is. That was a sort of racist act to not have that, even though all the people involved in it are not who I would class as classically racist, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your Sargon of Akkad, like alt-right types, is a different form of racism that can happen to white people with the best of intentions. If you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the fact that that space has been present before, and then it's like why? What was the reason given for the decision to not have that space specifically, considering it had been kind of the centerpiece of a lot of the discourse around Trans Pride Brighton for a lot of queer people of colour that I know? It's so wonderful to actually have that thing that's there that you can go to, and and I'm on the side of well, yeah, cool, awesome. I'm really glad it's there because it's so clearly needed. And so then it not being there 1 year, it's well, why is that? That's clearly it's been important enough to do in previous years. What's changed? So yes, I definitely caught some of the discourse before the event took place, and I was well, I mean, I'm not going to specifically be there, but that's something to keep an eye on. So yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm pretty white, Ashley. Are you pretty white?
I'm pretty white, yeah, and glistening today.
Yeah. So I think we should probably shut our mouths for a bit and let some people of colour take the chair, as it were. So I went to the because I heard that they were going to have a people of colour area of some form. It wasn't going to be the same standards as previous years, but they were going to put something together very much at the last minute, sort of after they got the response from the community that this is something that they desperately needed, and they were very hurt that it wasn't going to be there. So I went to the main tent and basically asked, where is it? They pointed me towards a bunch of trees about halfway down the park. I went there, and it was chock full of white people. And I was like, okay, something has happened here. The message has not been received. But then I found a small group of people of colour sat amongst them, and I thought, okay, maybe this is the area. So I went up to them and I got talking to Izzy Mirazan and Ali, two black trans guys who were there, and sort of wanted to get their take on the situation. So here it is. Izzy Mirazan and Ali, thank you for talking to me. So we are stood in what should have been the people of colour area of Pride, and it's looking pretty barren. What's your take on this?
Well, I saw basically on social media that there was that they were cutting funding because they didn't have enough money or something to cover the POC, Black and POC tent and all of that, which is really dumb because we're always being the one that get them. Yeah, the first one. That's the short straw. Yeah. We always get the short straw, as Black and POC people.
How important is it to have a space at events like this for people of colour?
Definitely important. We're here. We're part of this. It's not just a white thing to be LGBT plus. We're here.
We're here. We're queer. We're trans.
To say it, literally, we're all of that. It's not gonna change. We can just one day decide, let's not be part of that group. We want things. We deserve things.
Yeah.
We deserve things.
Because sometimes we don't get support from our own culture and from our own people. So having a space where we can meet other POC and Black people, it's great, who are queer. I went to UK Black Pride and I saw someone who comes from my own culture, which is very rare, who is queer, and that actually made me cry. I actually physically cry, which I rarely do. And so, like, it's always important to have places where you can find, like, brothers and sisters from your own culture, someone who, like, shares experiences the same as you. So, yeah.
Going forward, the committee people of Trans Pride have said that they will be open to the idea of a people of colour caucus to help organise with the event and basically be the lead when it comes to issues facing the people of colour community. Is that something that you like the sound of? What do you think Trans Pride Brighton should do going forward to be more inclusive?
Definitely have people of colour on the board. That's common sense, really.
Because at the moment, I think it's mainly white.
Yeah, that's why we don't have that space, really.
Yeah, I've from talking to them, there used to be some people of colour, but for a variety of reasons, a whole bunch of people, not just people of colour, had to drop out of the committee this year for health reasons and other stuff that's been going on.
Yeah.
So it's ended up where currently it's all white, but they're looking into, from what they've said to me, they're looking into arranging a black caucus. Not to necessarily, like, they want people of colour on the committee as well, but they also want a separate entity to oversee the main committee, if you see what I mean. Is that something you'd be okay with?
I feel like if we have someone in the people in the committee, then we wouldn't need somebody to, like, overview it, if that's the word.
Yeah, it's kind of like, because there's no need to, like, have someone who's, like, overviewing. If you have someone in the space, if you have several people of colour and black people who are in the space, having an opportunity to share their opinion and, like, go, like, this is what is needed for my POC black brothers and sisters, and, like, in between, so it's, like, literally, yeah.
That was Isa Mirazan and Ali.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they said it.
Yeah, pretty much. That it needs to be there, for goodness sake. So I don't think there's anything more that we particularly need to add from that, because it's sort of not really our place to do that. But what we did do, of course, was chat to a couple of the organisers. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I spoke to a few people, like, sort of about a few people that were on the committee about the general specifics of how this came about, and there was a whole bunch of angles in there that basically contributed to the QT-POC area not materialising. And I believe that was a tremendous mistake and a tremendous fuck up. And the impression I got from talking to them was that they know it. Believe me, I think that they understand that they have severely cocked up on this one. That's not me trying to make excuses for them or anything like that. It's just that's the conversations I had with them. And so here is the conversation that I had with Sarah Savage, who is the co-chair of the Trans Pride Brighton Committee. Here is the interview. Hello, Sarah Savage, trustee of Trans Pride Brighton. How are you doing today?
Hello, I am doing brilliantly. I'm on cloud 9 right now. Everything's gone really well. I'm really happy with the numbers. I'm really happy with the atmosphere. I'm really happy with the weather.
Yeah, it's the gods have shined themselves on the trans community today. So how was organising this year?
Organising this year has been the most difficult year ever. We've had the majority of the committee have had unplanned hospital visits. I myself was in hospital for 9 days after a major surgery on my kidney. We've had members of the committee who've had to step down because they've got long-term chronic health issues and they've had flare-ups. It's been very, very difficult this year. Funding has been squeezed. We were squeezed by the police and the licensing authorities. Everything has just been so much more stress.
There was some controversy with the lack of a people of colour area for a while. A lot of people were very, very upset about that. Some people said that it was sort of a racist act to not have a people of colour area. Are there things in place to help make this better next year? And is there anything you want to say to people about that?
Yeah, first off, we're really, really sorry that we don't have a QT-POC area. We did do some consultation with the community, and there were a few people who said that it felt a little bit like they would like to be more included instead of kind of segregated in a tent. There were other people who wanted an area just for people of colour. At the end of the day, we ran out of space, we ran out of time. And yeah, we're really, really sorry that we didn't do the same as we did last year. For next year, what we're hoping to do is have like a caucus of people of colour who is completely separate and autonomous from the Trans Pride Committee, but also one that has real power, so they can give us recommendations and we can act on them. We're completely volunteer run. We try our best, and we readily admit that our best sometimes isn't good enough, but we are completely committed to making things better next year.
Cool. I think from talking to people today, because I've talked to a few people, and I think the general feeling is that usually, like when these kind of events are put together, and if things get tough, there's been a history with, not necessarily Trans Pride apart from this year, but with other events where the people of colour stuff tends to get cut first. Was that the case this time, or was there other stuff going on?
No, so what happened was the police tried to tell us that we did not run a protest march, that we ran a parade. And the legal definition between a protest march and a parade is very different. A parade would mean that we would have to raise, we looked at it, we would have to raise about £15,000 to close the roads and pay for stewards. So we had to fight the police on that. We managed to convince them in the end, but the delay kind of created weeks and weeks and weeks of inaction from us. So we everything had to be put on hold. There are a number of other activities that we couldn't do this year just because we ran out of time, we ran out of money. It wasn't just the QTPOC 10 that got cancelled.
If people want to get involved with the QTPOC caucus, well, where can people get more info on that, and where can people apply?
So after today, we're going to probably have a look. We're going to set up an email address, and we're gonna publicise it on our Facebook page and on our Instagram and social medias. And from that, we'll hopefully get a group of people together, and we'll set them up. We'll pay for meeting rooms, we'll pay for everything. And we'll kind of see what comes of that. We're just a reflection of the community. So we're open to suggestions. We really welcome suggestions, and we encourage people to come and give us a piece of their mind, because we all listen. We really do listen. We care. We all give a shit.
Sarah, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks for giving us the chance.
So, yeah, I think that was a pretty honest response, to be honest. And just to say, fuck the police. Because I'm always going to say that, naturally. So, but I absolutely understand the complexities of putting something like this together. It's a shame, and it kind of looks really bad that the, QTPOC area was one of the things to go. I'm not precisely sure of the details on other stuff that might have been missing, that might have been there in previous years, but, as ever, there's kind of more going on than like a deliberate exclusion. However, I think their way of kind of responding to this in particular is the right one, because that's going to be quite democratic. It's going to be quite wide-ranging in that sense, in terms of the voices that are going to be in it. So, yeah, I wasn't there, darling. What do you think?
I think that this is, like I alluded to before, this is a classic example of people with the best of intentions, specifically white people, because who may enter these things with the best of intentions, and they can still fuck it up, basically. It's something that I know I've done. It's something that I'm pretty sure every white person I know has done. We can enter these things with the best of intentions, but then this shows that white people can come in with the best of intentions when it comes to race and still, massively drop the ball. And I can say that it's both true at the same time that these people do put in all this work for a lovely event.
Yes.
But also, this was something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. So if you happen to be a person of colour listening to this under the trans and non-binary umbrella, look in the description. We will provide links and email addresses and all of that so you can get involved.
That about wraps it up for Trans Pride Brighton 2019. Did you enjoy it overall?
Overall, I did. Overall, I think that the event was a success. There was a major downer on this particular area, but overall, I think there was more good done than harm in the grand scheme of things, and I'm very much looking forward to next year, because hopefully these issues will have been sorted out.
Addressed satisfactorily. And on that slightly optimistic note, I think that's us done. Don't forget you can check us out on all the usual social media manners. So on Twitter, at WhatTheTrans. We're at whattheTransPod.tumblr.com. That's our sort of website where most of the description in things is. What are the other social media things we have?
Just a Facebook.
Facebook.
/WhatTheTrans.
Woo!
We do have an Instagram account, but we've never used it because right now we've only got so much emotional capacity to deal with certain kinds of social media. But if you want to come in and help out run the Instagram, or come on as a researcher, check us out on any of the social media, send us a message, and we will get you in the fold.
Yes, and we will occasionally have parties, and I'll buy you a cake or something, or we will teach you a new skill. Anyway, yes. Thank you for listening. I like for people in the UK who are understandably vexed about the recent news. I'm sorry. We'll get through this, but we might have to do a revolution.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to work on my slogan ability, on my chant ability, because right now it is below par.
Well, what we could do is we could discuss some potential chants on a future episode, and people could vote on the best one.
Now, that's a wonderful idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll bring a little democracy to What the Trans instead of it being the Michelle and Ashley hegemony, which has dominated the airways for so long.
Dominated.
Yeah, I just really love saying that word. So, read into that.
We will dominate the iTunes podcast charts.
Yeah, but subtly, like a alien brain parasite that just manipulates the person into doing what it wants. That's us. That is. Anyway,
right, I'm going to have to go and jump into an ice bath because I am quite gross after this.
I'm going to go and stand mostly naked on the balcony. So if you're around the Clayton area of Manchester in the next few minutes, you're in for a treat. So
thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep, we will speak to you soon with hopefully some slightly less terrible news. Goodbye.
Bye.